All right. I'm hearing the sound of recording just started. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here. We're really excited to have this group here today for an important conversation about the role of future of gas proceedings in shaping the future of our energy systems and clean industrial heat. We are very fortunate to have technical experts and seasoned campaigners who have done extensive work in Illinois joining us today. For the bulk of the hour, we will have dedicated time to hear their firsthand perspectives, their insights, values, and lessons learned from their engagement with the fog docket in Illinois to advance industrial decarbonization. As we move through today's session, our goals here are to build baseline fluency on future of gas proceedings, share key learnings from Illinois, and provide this as a springboard for advocates like you who are attending, who have been exploring what tools or venues are possible for advancing clean industrial heat policies. Next slide, please. Okay. Before we dive into the main programming for the day, I want to quickly outline what to expect in the next hour. In just a minute or so, I will pass it over to my colleague Suzanne to provide a very brief overview of what a future of gas docket is, which states are using them, and how this tool can help advocates move closer to your climate and industrial decarbonization goals. Then we'll facilitate a fireside chat discussion among advocates engaging in the Illinois fog proceeding, exploring insights, challenges, and next steps. We will also leave lots of time for Q&A among all participants, so please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box at any time. My colleagues at Weather World Group, you see here on the screen, Suzanne and Serena, who is doing the screen sharing, the slide sharing right now, will be supporting all logistical needs and monitoring the chat box throughout the session. As you heard at the top of the hour, this learning session is being recorded. We will be sharing the recording and any additional resources with all meeting registrants next week. Um, with that, I want to move into introducing today's panelist. Next slide, please. We're really lucky to be joined by the following colleagues, starting with Archie Fraser from senior research analyst from American Council for Energy Efficient Economy, or widely known as ACEEE. We also have Alina Vanuska, Industrial Decarbonization Fellow, as well as Melissa Holting, Director of Industrial Decarbonization from Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, C2ES. We also have Elena Saxonhouse, Managing Attorney from Sierra Club. To round out this panel, we have Stephanie Blumenthal, Building Decarbonization Campaign Contractor from Illinois Environmental Council. With that, please join me to extend a very warm welcome to our panelists. And with me wrapping up the introduction, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Suzanne to go over some level setting slides on future of gas docket. Over to you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Yue, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Next slide, please. So I am going to spend a relatively short amount of time talking about what is a future of gas framework, concept, policy proceeding. Then I'll segue into talking about industrial sector clean heat and the overlaps with future of gas. And finally, tee up the dialogue that we'll have with panelists by sharing a bit of background context on the Illinois future of gas docket. But to get started, public utility commissions, or as they're sometimes known, public service commissions, have a mandate to regulate the services and the rates of public utilities that bring us services like electricity, natural gas, water, and more. And so the future of gas, or as it is sometimes colloquially referred to, FOG, is a framework for guiding where we should be and how we should get there with regard to the methane gas system. So it is about reconciling the system as it exists right now with net zero climate targets. And implied in Future of Gas is that rather than what they've always done, which includes approving new gas pipelines, evaluating rate cases, some state commissions have begun to look at a future without methane gas. In other words, gas system transition planning. And as most of us know, there are many reasons to reevaluate a business as usual scenario of the gas system's continual growth. From different lenses, we can talk about economic, regulatory, and equity arguments. I don't plan to go deep into these today, but I do want to summarize why we need to undergo a managed transition of the gas system. Climate targets are in conflict with gas system growth. Pollution impacts of the gas system are unevenly distributed and disproportionately borne by environmental justice communities. Past investments made by utilities continue to shape future rates that ratepayers bear for decades. And finally, vulnerable communities will be harmed if the transition off of a gas system is not thoughtfully managed. And so as it has become integrated into the policy side of decision-making, the future of gas is a comprehensive and system-wide planning effort. And it can include, it's definitely not limited to these things, but it can include residential equipment transitions, infrastructure downsizing, regulatory reform, and industrial decarbonization, which is what we're going to get into in just 1 minute. Next slide. So we have been witnessing future of gas proceedings open up in a number of states. As of me speaking now, there have been 14 different FOG proceedings initiated in 12 states plus DC, there have been FOG reports actually released. And the map that you see here on the slide, produced by the Building Decarbonization Coalition, displays the status of these various FOG proceedings. I will also note that FOG proceedings often get kickstarted by things like legislation, petitions, executive orders, and there's a number of different actors that can be involved in advancing them. That includes governors, state agencies, lawmakers, and of course, advocates. Next slide. So where then I want to take us after, I know that's quite a brief overview of Future of Gas, but bear with me. I'm going to segue now into where this concept and framework intersects with the industrial sector. So the industrial sector is really a catch-all term for many, many different distinct industries. This includes food and beverage manufacturing, paper and pulp, chemicals production, as well as the production of materials like glass, steel, cement, etc. And in all of these sectors, heat is a very fundamental component of how various industrial processes work to generate the material that they're involved in making. Right now, natural gas powers a lot of those heating needs. And as you can see from this visual, about 1/4 of US gas production is used to power the industrial sector. Low and medium temperature heat, which is defined as below 300 degrees Celsius, accounts for about half of industrial heat uses. And so if we look at that in emissions terms, we're talking about 6% roughly of our national emissions footprint is due to low and medium temperature heat in the industrial sector. These emissions are primarily concentrated in a few subsectors of industry: food and beverage, paper and pulp, and parts of the chemical sectors. So in the case of low and medium temperature heat manufacturing processes, we don't actually need any major technological breakthroughs in order to decarbonize this heat. Much of the industrial equipment actually can be powered by electricity. And examples of what I'm talking about include boilers that produce steam for pasteurization processes in the food and beverage sector, furnaces that melt glass, and air dryers that dry paper. So technologies like industrial heat pumps, electric boilers, these things exist. They are already commercially available, although to some limited degree in the US, but nonetheless available. And similar to when we talk about building decarbonization, it's less a question of technology, and it is more about getting the right policy and regulatory structures in place in order to incentivize the uptake of clean heat solutions by industry. Okay, so now I want to tee up where things are. Oh, shoot, I'm so sorry. I forgot to say next slide, but if you go to the next slide, you can see what I'm talking about as far as kind of the spread of different industry subsectors and some of the ones that I was talking about that produce that involve medium and low heat and that contribute an outsized portion of emissions where we can see readily available industrial electrification solutions. Okay, now next slide. I am going to just say in the last couple minutes I have before we get to a Q&A with the panelists, just a little bit about the Illinois Future of Gas proceeding and where industrial heat has factored in. So back in last year, in March, the Illinois Commerce Commission initiated a Future of Gas proceeding. And this was the result of final orders that were issued during a number of different gas utility rate cases. And the Illinois Commerce Commission, or ICC, stated that a Future of Gas docket would be necessary because the gas system would have to change in the state to reach Illinois' 100% clean energy goals, which were set up by the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, passed a number of years ago. And so from March of 2024, the Future of Gas proceeding has included two phases, two series of workshops. And so phase one was focused on determining what issues and challenges are relevant to decarbonizing the gas sector. Phase two has focused on addressing potential solutions and formulating recommendations to address the issues that were identified. The end goal of the Future of Gas proceeding, as articulated by ACEEE, is a final report that's going to summarize the findings and also issue recommendations to lawmakers and regulatory agencies. And these are obviously very significant. They will be used, the findings of this report will be used by lawmakers, by agencies to inform decisions about the long-term transition to clean and affordable heat. So a group of advocates, some of whom we are going to hear from today, have been engaged in this proceeding in Illinois over the past many months with the goal of advancing clean industrial heat through the proceeding. So one aspect of the Future of Gas workshops has been a pilot development process. Stakeholders, participants in the FOG have been invited to submit pilot projects that could be included with natural gas companies' long-term infrastructure plans. And the group of advocates that we'll hear from focused on clean industrial heat submitted a proposal for a thermal energy storage pilot. Thermal energy storage or thermal batteries can provide decarbonized heat for industrial energy users. They work by charging from the grid during off-peak times and when surplus renewables are on the grid. They are, in other words, a really critical technology that would be a tool in the toolkit for industrial electrification. And so just this past month in July, the ICC announced a short list of preliminary selections, and we were very fortunate to see that it included the industrial electrification pilot. And so by no means is this the end of the road, but it does represent an important step forward and meaningful progress in ways that we can look at FOG proceedings as a strategic venue to advance industrial heat decarbonization. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn things over back to my colleague Yue and our group of panelists for the fireside chat conversation that we mentioned about insights from the process, challenges, and next steps. And I just want to make one reminder that please do submit any questions that you have. And we, after this, are going to spend a good chunk of the rest of the hour talking through questions that the audience shares.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Suzanne, and thank you, Serena, for taking off the presentation so that we can see our panelists' face. That was a great level setting introduction, and now I'm very excited to hear more from our panelists and you all unique perspectives on how you have been engaging in this process. I think for the first question, I would love to ask that we all know it has to be a collaborative effort on anything like this to move anything on this level. A variety of different individuals and groups work together on the fog. Could you all each share a bit reflecting on the sector where you come from, whether that be organizing, private sector, or technical? Could you each speak to the role that you or your organization have played in advocating around the fog? I think every I will open it up for for whoever wants to jump in first.
I'm happy to start. So Alina and I are with not just C2ES, but the Renewable Thermal Collaborative, which seeks to scale up renewable heating and cooling. So Future of Gas is right in the pocket of the goal of our organization. We're all about finding alternatives to gas and working with our coalition of companies, both our members on the end user side, as well as the solution providers on the tech provider side to enable these technologies to succeed. So we come into this representing our companies who have facilities in Illinois, who might want to decarbonize those facilities by installing renewable thermal technologies like industrial heat pumps, thermal batteries. We also work with clean hydrogen RNG and solar thermal, and geothermal as of late. So we come in hearing those perspectives from our companies who are seeking, for example, to get lower electricity rates so that electrified technologies are more cost competitive with natural gas technologies, as well as our solution providers who are the folks who are out. The technology is available to replace fossil gas right now. And most of them, all of them actually are ready to do commercial projects. So we come into it with that viewpoint in mind of companies wanting to do projects and technology providers who have the things that can replace gas in the industrial sector.
Super helpful. Thank you, Melissa, for sharing the private sector experience or perspective. Maybe we can go to Archie to see if you want to share a little bit more from your side.
Sure. Sure. My name is Archie. I'm with the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, or ACEEE. We've been engaged in the FOG, or the Future of Gas proceedings, since phase one. We're a nonprofit research group that does research on ending energy waste and the clean energy transition. And so we had an opportunity to present in both the phase one and phase two kind of learning sessions that the commission convened, and then have also been engaged in the working groups that were referenced earlier in the kind of level setting presentation. I think, a really important role that will be relevant in every Future of Gas convening in every state is making sure that the commission staff have the resources they need to make, informed decisions about what technologies exist, and that there's a serious potential to transition off of the methane gas system. And especially for the industrial sector, where there's a real wide variety of, it might be really challenging to get off of transition a steel plant, but that doesn't mean the rest of the industrial sector is, a food and beverage manufacturer doesn't have a solution that they could deploy tomorrow. And of course, there's a whole lot of details to get right, but I think expertise on the different subsectors and the potential around them is going to be really important, just in any kind of proceeding like the Future of Gas. And so that's one role we've been trying to play, is making sure that the commission staff have kind of the broad array of research that exists out there, and also supporting advocates who, also care a lot about making connections from how industrial electrification could impact air quality in local communities, and things like that. So I'll pass it over to
Yeah,
I don't know who wants to go next.
I'm happy to take it over. Thank you, Archie, for that. I'm excited to dive a bit more into the type of research and the work you are doing there. Um, Maybe for the next one, I'm hearing the advocate side or providing the technical studies that advocates could use. I'm curious to hear from Elena. You and your colleague have been doing a lot of campaigning and organizing around this work specifically. So maybe I can pass over to you to hear a little bit more on from you.
Yep, happy to. Hi, I'm Elena Saxonhouse. I'm with Sierra Club, and we have a small but mighty industrial transformation campaign, and we work, among other things, on industrial electrification. And in Illinois, I'm involved. I'm an attorney. We also have a full-time campaign organizer, Zippy Horwitz, who couldn't be here, but I'm going to try to kind of share both of our roles since she's not here. And we cover pretty different pieces of it. But I think for Sierra Club's participation, one of the main roles that I think we've been playing is to really raise the public health angle and the ways that addressing industrial electrification would advance not only decarbonization, but reduction of co-pollutants and also the connection with other legal obligations the state has to reduce those air pollutants, like meeting federal health standards for ozone. And then another big piece of it, and this is more Zippy's role, is really in increasing meaningful public participation and finding mechanisms to include voices from fence line communities at really every opportunity. And that could be including stories from constituents or working on joint sign-on letters with those communities, as they may not have as much capacity to participate in the full process. So ideally, the commission would host, more public hearings and comment periods, and we're going to be continuing to advocate for that kind of thing as the process moves forward. And then lastly, I'll just say, as an attorney, I kind of have on my mind, like, what will build a record and what information do we need to make sure we have before the commission in the early phases so that when it comes time to make the policy recommendations, we can point back to that evidence and it's evidence that the staff and the commission can rely on when they're making their recommendations or making any decisions. So we kind of have a dual purpose of building the record and the argument for clean industrial heat. And then we're also providing tools for regulators to take the next step with the best information available. I'll leave
Thank
it
you.
there for now.
And this is a emergent, actually, no. I was gonna say I have an emergency coming up because you might have seen the flashing light from my background. The fire alarm just went off in my apartment, but it also stopped. I apologize for that. I apologize for that distraction, but let's go back to our regular programming. Thank you so much for bearing with me, and thank you for sharing the Sierra Club perspective and approach in this work. I want to make sure we bring in Stephanie and your role, as well as the work you are doing with the broader coalition of Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition. And I'm going to pass over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here. I work for the Illinois Environmental Council. We're a nonprofit C3, C4 organization that's based in Chicago and Springfield, Illinois. Um, Kind of our bread and butter is state policies. So coming into regulatory work and the building sector was a little bit new for us, but we did it through our collaboration with the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition. We were a founding member of that coalition, I think back in 2016, maybe even a little bit earlier, and had some successes passing larger energy bills. And so when that coalition adopted kind of a three-pillar or three-pronged approach for our kind of next stage after passing a large bill in 2021, building decarbonization was a part of that. Um, so I came into this role last year and was asked to help coordinate the campaign for our clean buildings work. And at the time, it actually didn't include industry. Um, but when I started, I got connected with some folks, including Archie, and started learning and helping to form a group that meets about once a month now that Archie skillfully leads. That brings together folks that are interested in working not just on the future of gas, but on industrial work at large in Illinois. And a focus of that group, as I think we're going to keep hearing about, has been, I guess, the pilots and also the future of gas process from an industrial point. And I think it's been really exciting. I don't have an expertise in industrial clean heat, but I've learned a lot, and I think it's been really exciting because myself and a couple other folks like Sippy Horowitz, who Elena mentioned, have been kind of serving as the conduits between the two groups, and kind of exciting that some of our groups, including some EJ partners and other folks that are based in Illinois on the ground, are getting more interested in working on industrial decarbonization. So I think it's exciting. I think that we bring a good reminder of like the need for grassroots and the fence line community kind of input, as well as some more experience with just like in-house Illinois work. So yeah, I think it's been exciting, I think, for the coalition to kind of keep expanding our definition of what our clean buildings work should be into this space.
Yeah, that's definitely an exciting trend that we continue to observe just on the sideline, our team. Now, I want to thank you for all the perspective and just getting a little bit more texture to where you all coming from, entering into this work specifically. I feel like now that we learned what this is, and I think folks in the audience might be eager to know what are some of the tools or hows to do this work. So I'm going to pivot us to the second question, what were some of the key intervention points, tools, or levers that this group of advocates were from your organization specifically identified and used to advance industrial decarbonization through the FOG process?
I'm happy to jump in and start us off. So one of the key points we locked in on was the pilot proposal or the call for pilot ideas. In December of last year, the ICC put out a call for pilot ideas, and over 100 ideas were submitted, including we all on this call submitted individual ideas. However, only 10 to 15 would be ultimately selected. So in April, May, a number of us on this call in the industrial NGO world came together and collaborated to develop a combined industrial proposal for industrial heat pumps and thermal energy storage. It's a cohort idea that's focused on subsidizing capital and interconnection costs, developing and piloting industrial electrification rate structures, as well as technical assistance. And I think this was a really important it was important for us to unite behind and work together because ultimately it got draft selected. It's not in the final stage yet, but it was one of the 10 that was selected. And I think that was due to all the work that we put in and the thought and everybody collaborating. So that's one key intervention point that we noticed and worked on.
And just to build on that, I think a key thing top of mind for a lot of the ICC staff as they build out their report and are drafting it is asking questions to try to get, what's going on in other states or other countries and how are they approaching their gas system. And so, none of us or us as like each of us on this panel have all the answers or insight into every sector, but because we've been having this group that's been meeting, we really have been able to I think produce a better work product and like argument for the commission about industrial electrification and the multitude of benefits like, for people in Illinois. And I would also add, I think, to Stephanie's point about integrating more with other advocates like fence line communities. There's the opportunity to submit comments and just in general engage has been just a way to keep growing our coalition. And the future of gas proceedings is going to end in, well, we're not totally sure about that. They're supposed to have a final resort report by the end of February of next year. But it's just been an important opportunity for everyone who wants to work on industrial decarb to get together in the state and also be able to support each other in other venues outside of the Illinois Commerce Commission.
Yeah, and I would agree that the pilot piece was key, not only for like if it gets adopted itself, but just the education piece and just getting people to understand like what we're actually talking about when we're talking about industrial electrification, just making it more concrete. And then the other working group that Illinois had was this decarbonization pathways working group, which was always like a little amorphous and vague, and I'm not sure I totally understand it still. But it was important, I think, to be in that space where, there's just not a lot of knowledge right now about your general, among even like consultants or the ICC staff about kind of these nuances of like low heat versus medium heat in different sectors of the industrial landscape. And so making sure that they weren't just kind of lumping everything in industrial together and saying, okay, we're going to put this off to the side, we're going to do this later, it's too hard. So having some folks advocating on industrial specifically in that process, I think was also pretty important.
Thank you for sharing that pilot insights, as well as I think this is actually kind of bringing us to one of the next questions I was going to ask. I'm hearing that the need to for advocates to band together and the need for some general education and awareness. Um, I would love to hear more from you all, like if there are lessons learned or insights looking back at your engagement. I think you already started touching on that, that could help advocates in other states start planning to either like start their initiating a proceeding. As we see from the map that my colleague Suzanne showed earlier, there are currently around 13, 14 states that have this. Or if for states that already have a existing fog proceeding, do you have lessons or insights for advocates who might be thinking about incorporating industrial decarbonization priorities into the existing proceeding?
Yeah, so I'll jump in again. One thing is, and this goes to the work that Stephanie has been doing, is it is really important to coordinate, I think, early between industrial and residential advocates. I'm not sure that we did that as well as we could have at the beginning. And so I would recommend that because there can be kind of tensions in the way that people are, thinking about pushing this forward. And there, I think, are misconceptions sometimes on that, industrial electrification is, like I said, like harder, more complicated, but also that it's maybe just not helping people, like normal people, as much as a residential. Electrification could be. And so I think Zippy's done a lot of good work in educating kind of there are real impacts to these boilers being in people's communities and there's health impacts and there are we are seeing like a lot of actual community enthusiasm about talking about replacements. And so yeah, just that coordination piece between the advocates and the different sectors.
Hearing that, Melissa, you want to jump in?
Sure, sure. In terms of lessons learned, I mean, some of them are really small. I think there was action earlier on for people to request speakers. There were presentations. Archie, I'm not sure how ACEEE got plugged in rather early on, but I assume it was someone saying, hey, we haven't talked about the industrial sector yet. We want a presentation to cover this. So I think different folks were emailing the facilitator and either offering presentations that covered industrial or requesting presentations that cover industrial. I mean, that's just a big overarching theme to me is that fog processes include industrial as an important source of emissions, an important source of current gas use, an important source of co-pollutants with greenhouse gases that, as Elena said, impact folks' health in the communities, in the frontline communities. So asking for industrial to be covered, there's a chat in the Illinois future of gas during the meetings. I'm a firm believer in using the chat and countering misinformation that might come up in the chat, or shining a light on the fact that these technologies exist and this is a real thing. So those are small things, like ask that industrial be covered. When people are, make sure that truths about industrial decarbonization and industrial electrification are raised in the chat. And also there have been opportunities to provide comments throughout, and Alina and I, in submitting our comments, have been like, please make sure industrial is represented in the final report. Please make sure industrial is represented in the final selection of pilots. So those are kind of broad themes. And one more thing to hit on quickly. Both the Illinois Farm Bureau and I think the Illinois Manufacturing Association have been basically saying that this is not possible, that using electrified technologies is not possible. So part of the work for advocates to do, including us in bringing those technology provider voices in, is that it is possible. Technologies are available now. It's just like there's a lot of education that needs to happen among policymakers and stakeholders and industrial end users about those technologies and how they can be incorporated. So using all of the functions, all the communication functions, and then countering some of the lack of awareness among certain stakeholders are things that stick out in my mind.
Yeah, certainly. It's definitely no small feat to make sure the industrial topic to have a consistent presence in all the discussions. That's one of the very first two key steps to any future advocacy. I want to bring in Stephanie to share to see if you have anything from your perspective as well as your work with the broader coalition that you may want to add to this topic.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I was just thinking about it. Hearing something Elena said kind of sparked a note in my head, which is we needed to do some internal education with our advocates because most of them have been focused on residential. And it's not that they, you know, are the IMA and think that this is not possible or simply don't want it to be possible, but they also, sorry, my dog just groaned. Okay. Um, they they just didn't know. And we've been focused on residential decarb for a few years. And so there was some like internal work I think that was needed there and is still ongoing, I would say, which is a good thing. But I think it was just worth noting that the advocates we were asking to talk about some of this stuff weren't there yet. Um, that was one thing I was going to mention. And the other was kind of from the community organization and like in-person perspective, which is that all of the Illinois Future of Gas hearings have been held online, which is not originally what was promised. They were originally going to do some in-person meetings, and they have since not done that. And there have been some other kind of, they've all been 3 hour long meetings. Somebody might have mentioned that, and just not terribly accessible for community or environmental justice organizations that, maybe this is only one of 10 things that they're doing. And especially, right now, there's a lot to be kind of fighting against. And so they're just not very accessible. And so I've been working with some of the community organizations in the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition. We drafted a letter to the facilitator of the Future of Gas, and we've actually already gotten a response. So really excited to be opening up dialogue there. And I think that that can only help when it comes to working with, fence line communities, not just on thinking about, health impacts and indoor air quality for residential, but thinking about outdoor air quality, things of that nature for industrial. In the ways that kind of there is that overlap between direct impacts, kind of like what Sippy does, like Elena was saying, on communities. So yeah, definitely agree also with what Melissa said about using all of the functions. I would say that's also been a little bit of a struggle with our Future of Gas proceeding is that there hasn't been a lot of dialogue. There's been a lot of presentations and a lot of people putting what can only be described as false things in the chat. I'm going to use that language. Yeah, I think there's been some frustration on our end as advocates because there hasn't been a lot of ways to kind of actually have a conversation about what you're saying and where you got the information from or what like level of research quality is to be expected here. I probably reshared some of the stuff that you guys already said, but those were things I was thinking of for lessons learned.
No, I appreciate it. That's super helpful. I think I'm grabbing a couple of themes from y'all's answers. There's a need for getting a joint strategy between the building sector and the residential sector early on. There's probably a need for general education and just dispelling some of the misinformation out there. And I think I'm also hearing some of the limitations or inaccessibilities with thing that's baked in the existing process in terms of how general public and the fence line communities could get engaged or stay engaged in this process. And last but not least, there is always value in getting the words out there consistently, maintain the presence to make sure the topic of industrial decarb does not get lost in the process. Um, I'm checking time. We're at 1:41. So I want to make sure I know I'm seeing some like Q&A popping up in the chat. So I want to make sure we have enough time to get to the broader questions. So I'm going to transition us into the final question. I'm hearing we've already heard about the pilot process and very interested to want to open up with this question. What comes next in the fog process? And are there any challenges or not just challenges, things you're excited about that you see that is coming in the fog process?
I'll jump in first and speak to the pilot specifically. I do want to note that there is no funding source for these pilots yet. They have not identified a funding source, and I think there's a number of hurdles to get through, but that is a significant one, with the funding being unknown. I think they're optimistic they can pull it from a couple different places, but if we'll see, we'll see. But in terms of timeline, the ICC will select the final draft pilots September 4th, so in a couple of weeks. And then there will be comments due on September 19th for feedback on those final draft pilots. And then ICC staff will submit a report to the commission on their recommended pilots by the end of October. And then the commission may or may not open a docket to approve certain pilots, assuming they can find funding. So that's a short-term view of the pilot specifically over the next couple months, but I'll let other folks speak to the other parts of the process.
Yeah, I can jump in. I am also a part of I've been attending the Decarbonization Pathways Study, other working group that has met very rarely because they've basically been doing the work to like go through procurement to get someone to do this pathway study, which I think there actually has been progress on, which is very exciting. But we don't know if it's going to push the timeline back of the whole process. We're not sure exactly how much funding they were able to get through this procurement process and where that will land in terms of how large scale this study is. Obviously, there's only so much you can do in limited capacity of like time. But I think there's a lot of question marks around that still, especially with the time piece. And I know thinking legislatively for Illinois, our session goes from January till May or through May. And so, we're always kind of at the mercy of that too, hoping that we can get some legislative asks out of this report. So yeah, I think the decarbonization pathway study, while really exciting that people were able to push for it happening, there's still a lot of question marks around what it will yield and when it will occur and end.
Yeah, and following up on that, I mean, I think also there's a lot of uncertainty about what this final report, that is the ultimate end game of this whole process, I think, is this report that's planned for February right now, and how that's going to be used. Like, is it going to make specific policy recommendations? How much weight will those have? Will this report just sit on a shelf? I mean, of course, our job is to make sure that it doesn't and that we push for concrete measures and that those are carried forward. But I guess one thing I would think about if you're sort of starting out in this process is like how to maybe define better at the beginning what the end product is and how it's going to be used. Because I think on the one hand, it's sort of helpful that it's a little bit broad and we can think maybe more broadly than just the PUC's jurisdiction. We can think about what other agencies could be doing to advance this transition. But on the other, it might be a little bit too undefined, and we'll see kind of how useful the final report is.
And maybe just to add to that point about we need kind of a focused outcome, or that would have been helpful at the start. Maybe a common thread across everyone's comments about the process is it's been very slow, and they've been constructing this proceeding as it's kind of developing, and meetings get pushed, and it doesn't feel like it's the commission not prioritizing this. It's just things come up, and it takes a long time to get everything going. But the reality is, like when this started at the beginning of 2024, we had a very different political environment, energy cost environment, like all sorts of things that, when this report comes out in the maybe first quarter of next year, or the second quarter, it'll be very different. And so I think as advocates, thinking about how whatever comes out of the report responds to the present moment and not the moment in 2024, and how we can make sure that people who are really excited about the future of gas proceedings when it kicked off are reminded of what is in the report, and we can get some kind of concrete wins in Illinois out of it. So those are all things I think that we'll have to make sure we keep energy around next year, and make the most of it.
Yeah, totally hear you. I think folks are agreeing in the chat as well that advocates are certainly navigating a lot of uncertainties right now, and hearing there is the process itself takes a lot of time, and that further just made me want to thank you all for the work you all did on this work, and thank you for preparing all the questions, because I know this is a long and sometimes does not have immediate fruitful outcomes that's in the horizon, that's visible immedately to everybody. So that's really just want to again share the appreciation for the answers, insights, and the great work you all are doing. Um, I believe I wrapped up the questions we prepared for this fire chat section, but I do believe we have some Q&As that have popped up in the chat, and I believe Suzanne from my team has some other questions we could follow up to you all. So with that, I am going to pass it to Suzanne to see if we have filtered through or sift through some of the questions that we've seen popped up in the chat.
Thanks, Yui, and thanks to every panelist for these thoughtful answers. I really appreciate this discussion, and also, thinking about the ways that the group that is attending this session, who may come from different state contexts, can be thinking about, what is the corollary across a different state's service commission, FOG proceeding that might be open. One question that we received in the chat, and I see, Elena, you already put an answer to it, but I just wanted to give folks the opportunity to expand, is whether any organization that is represented here on the panel explored the potential of industrial customers and thermal energy networks. And so, Elena, I know you shared that Sierra Club has discussed this in comments, submitted a pilot proposal, and there is one TENS thermal energy network pilot moving forward. It might just be residential or commercial. And so wanted to give you a chance if there's anything else to say, or if anyone else wanted to weigh in.
I don't have anything else on that. Somebody else might know more.
Okay, that's all right. Not seeing any further context, but I hope that that is helpful to just get a little bit more clarity on. Another question that I wanted to share, to the extent, I know we already have talked a little bit about this, but could you comment on how the political landscape in Illinois that, has existed for the time leading up to the fog proceeding and current landscape might have influenced the outcomes and the process where it stands now in the fog proceeding, whether that's in how the fog was initiated or the outcomes that you're anticipating now or the process that things that you have witnessed.
I'm happy to take a stab. Yeah, I think so. There were sort of a few things, I guess, leading up to the 2024 beginning of the Future of Gas process. A big one, I think, for us is that our governor ended up really liking climate. That's just been a huge deal that I don't think anybody fully expected when he got elected. When we passed the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act in 2021, that was kind of a big catalyst, I think, at least for the Clean Jobs Coalition. And then the 2023 rate cases, which were, I'll say, outrageous to say the least. Because of some of the commissioners that were appointed by the governor. So Illinois' Commerce Commission has appointed commissioners, not elected, by the governor's office. So he has appointed some commissioners that are more sympathetic to questioning utilities as opposed to just red stamp. And moving things or rubber stamp, and moving things through, which I think is often the case in these sorts of institutions. So that when 2023 rate cases came around, one of the results of those rate cases was this proceedings. So I think a lot of it was coming from our executive branch, which is great. And I think in terms of the way things have changed, I know that there, like many kind of blue states, I think Illinois is also kind of dealing with the fallout of trying to figure out how to put a lot of backstops in place. And I think also there's a really strong labor presence in Illinois, which we appreciate and we have struggled with decarb, as I think is sometimes the case. So I think that's, I don't know, maybe some context there as well. Happy to get more specific if I need to, but that's what I'm thinking.
That was very helpful. Thank you, Stephanie. I don't want to take the floor away from anyone else who wants to speak, but happy to.
I'll just add like a really short thing. I mean, not to state the obvious, but Illinois is a Democratic trifecta. And so I think that does add motivation to participate in the process when we've been hearing that the legislation is waiting for the fog process to produce the report. And so people want to stay in it to make sure the report is good so that the legislation that hopefully will come out of it will be well informed by a solid report. So I think we're all hoping the end result here is some helpful legislation. And that's more likely because we have a favorable makeup in the legislature.
Thank you, Melissa. Another question that we got is about state clean heat standards and the interaction that a future of gas docket might have with a CHS, a clean heat standard. I want to open it up to anyone who would be interested in speaking to that. I think the question is about, are they complementary? How do they overlap? Could there be a tension between them?
I mean, I guess the fog process is so broad that one of the things that could come out of it is a recommendation that they adopt a clean heat standard, and that, or like what that clean heat standard should look like, and that kind of thing.
I will say, I know at least on the residential side, there's been some conversations about feeling like perhaps expecting that from the report might be a little too ambitious, unfortunately. But I know that is something that is like in a potential bill for our coalition. So we would be excited if they recommended that.
I was speaking more kind of theoretically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate both of those helpful pointers. We are getting to the last 5 minutes of our session, and so I wanted to ask on a different note a question about if anyone could speak to the role that public education, broader community engagement efforts might play in this issue. And that might be what has happened. That might be a vision of what the potential is there. And also, if there are any thoughts you have to offer about building a strong messaging strategy for public outreach, I think that would be very of interest.
Happy to start. Anybody can interrupt me. I mean, the way I got into this was through coalition work, and our coalition, the Clean Jobs Coalition, is groups across the state that are ranging from big greens to neighborhood organizations. We have some businesses, business groups, really kind of all across the gamut. And so I think that's been the way that we've built a lot of power. I know that recently around the future of gas process, we've gotten some feedback that some folks in Illinois agencies are feeling like there aren't like quote unquote regular people showing up to these or caring about these. Some of us have argued that's because they are 3-hour long meetings. But I think, that's part of our job. I think as a group based in Illinois with, our partners in the Clean Jobs Coalition is to show like that our members do care about this outcome, and our members represent people of all different like walks of life in the state. So I think that's been a big part of what I've kind of taken away from working on industrial work. Yeah.
I would just chime in that it's the industrial sector is complicated and a lot of the solutions aren't necessarily super straightforward on the surface. Like there's this intersection of efficiency with electrification and understanding, how all of that plays a part. And I just think it's something that people could get really excited about if they sort of knew all the pieces. And I think, again, just to echo Stephanie's point, like it's our job to make sure people know about how not only are you gonna, not be dealing with methane gas and all the health impacts, but you're also maybe your businesses will save money and you'll, have this economic impact that'll be great and all these other things. And that's really important that we're not losing sight of like getting in the weeds of responding to random comments and also making sure we're talking outside of the venue to other people.
Thank you both for those very thoughtful and insightful remarks. Does anyone else have any last thoughts before we close? Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you so much to our wonderful panelists that we have here today. We know that you took time out of your additional responsibilities to come and talk about the work that you have been doing. And yeah, the progress that's been made by advocates in Illinois, working as you were describing, Stephanie, in coalition, sharing insights with one another and collaborating for a common goal is something that we really are excited about the potential to see replicated in other states. And so we are hoping that this was a helpful learning session for folks that joined to get a sense of the Illinois future of gas proceeding, also where there are opportunities to leverage a process like this to focus on industrial electrification. And want to thank everybody for taking the time to attend today. Following this session, as Yue mentioned, BWG will send slides and notes. We also know we didn't get to everybody's questions today, and so if there's anything that we didn't address, we will follow up after the session to try and shed as much light and information as we can. We'll also share ways to stay in touch and contact information. And yeah, I want to thank everybody again for taking the time, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your day.